Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. Here we are in this Christmas to New Year's week. We're going to spend a few minutes together today. I've got my cup of coffee here. Actually used the K-Cup in the office. Had some holiday blend, Christmas, Starbucks Christmas holiday, whatever it's called. Put it in the Keurig machine there and brewed this cup up this morning. Hope you're having a good morning. It's a little warmer today. We're getting out of those really cold days we've had over the Christmas weekend. I got to say, it was a nice change of pace from our usual weather, and made Christmas probably festive more so because of that cold weather. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas wherever you were, however you spent it. I hope it was a good one for you. I know we're here in the Keys. There are people that have moved away from our community all the way up to the Midwest, Chicago and the like, and I saw some of those temperatures. And if you were in some of those cold places, wow, more power to you. I know I could whine about how chilly I got down here, and it was nothing compared to some other places. So I hope, even in spite of some of the bitter cold around our country, you had a good Christmas day with family and those you love. It's an interesting week, isn't it? This week between Christmas and New Year's for us in the Keys. It's a very busy week, a very popular week for people to travel down here. We notice it on our roads. We notice it in the restaurants and the different places. Lots of people, come down to the Keys for this week. I guess because, school is out and people can travel and all of that sort of thing. And maybe because we are typically one of the more warm places. But it is interesting. I've been thinking about this this last few days. You're familiar with one of the songs of Christmas, the 12 Days of Christmas. It's one of those carols, 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. I've seen a lot of the memes going around about that song. Some of them are I don't know if memes, but some internet posts, social media posts. Is it somehow kind of a Christian sort of catechism, the different things symbolizing it? And I thought that was interesting, but it made me kind of dig a little bit. And I came across something that, I guess because of my Baptist background, wasn't really a part of my upbringing or my celebration of Christmas. But the 12 Days of Christmas is actually, in some corners of Christendom, a real thing. Christmas is a 12-day celebration, feast, festival. And rather than culminating in Christmas, it begins, the first day of Christmas is Christmas Day, and it culminates the 12th day of Christmas, January 5th, leading into January 6th, which is Epiphany, another celebration we'll talk about in just a few minutes. It's actually pretty fascinating. And in certain traditions of Christianity, each day celebrates sometimes a different saint or a different significant event around the birth of Jesus. It's actually quite fascinating. In fact, we're going to be right on schedule with our church on this Sunday, which will be New Year's Day, which would be the 8th day of Christmas. We're going to be talking about Simeon and Anna and Jesus being presented at the temple. And that's the thing in the 12 days of Christmas happened on the 8th day. That was the Jewish traditional custom. On the 8th day, you presented your firstborn child for circumcision and those sorts of things at the temple. And that's what we see in the scriptures Mary and Joseph doing with the baby Jesus. So we'll talk about that, but also those two characters of Christmas, Simeon and Anna, that factor so prominently in that story. But that's the idea, that this celebration of Christmas extends beyond Christmas for almost 2 weeks, culminating in Epiphany. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I've kind of done my research. I knew about Epiphany primarily after I met Denise, and she grew up over in the Tampa area and had relatives over in Pinellas County near Tarpon Springs. And Tarpon Springs has a huge Epiphany Day tradition. It's like 115, 116, 117 years of doing this, that on Epiphany, this is a Greek Orthodox community, the Tarpon Springs sponge diving community. In fact, one of our folks, Taki, often goes up there for this particular observance, Epiphany. They have Mass in the morning, and then they march to one of the springs there. And kind of the big thing that I saw, and would often be on the local news when we lived in Tampa, is they take a cross and they throw it in the spring here, January 6th, and all the young men dive in, and the young man who comes out with the cross is thought to be blessed for the entire year. They celebrate it around water because it's about the idea of Epiphany means the appearing. And so as far as the 12 days of Christmas, in fact, the day or the night before Epiphany is called Twelfth Night. You probably recognize that from some of your literature classes from way back, Shakespeare and all. But Twelfth Night leads into Epiphany, and Epiphany celebrates the appearance of the Messiah. It could be in the sense of, well, the appearance at the temple, the appearance of the Son of God, the incarnation, the visit of the Magi. Sometimes it's called Three Kings Day, where the gospel of the good news of God's grace is visited to the Gentiles. It also points forward to his baptism. That's why the Orthodox tradition has the water as a central symbol, where on his baptism, at that same symbol, they release a dove, because the Holy Spirit, like a dove, came down. The voice of the Father spoke his blessing over his beloved Son in whom he's well pleased. So all of that ends the 12 days of Christmas, and it ends in Epiphany. It's an interesting thing. And we're actually, in our culture, we're kind of the opposite of that. I think most people, I thought, and maybe you did too, the 12 days of Christmas was leading up to Christmas, because in our mindset, everything moves toward Christmas. And if we're honest about the whys and wherefores of that, it's not because of our religious traditions and background. It's because of the commercial realities of Christmas being the key driver of the economy for so many businesses. If you don't make it during the Christmas season, that's when a lot of them make a lot of their money, is over the Christmas season. So Christmas becomes the end in our Western and commercial or consumeristic culture. And in reality, in most of Christian history, Christmas was seen as the beginning. And here was the thought that occurs to me in that regard. Too often, even when we celebrate a day like Christmas as a holiday, by the way, holy day, that's the origin of that word that we use, this holy day like Christmas, where we focus on the gift of God through the birth of Jesus and the incarnation of Jesus as the Son of God that begins the process that leads to our salvation by his death and resurrection. Even when we focus on that, it seems like it's the end of something and we just want to move on and get past it. But when you consider, not just, you're saying, well, look, you're a Baptist church. Yes, and I'm a Baptist background. Maybe many of you come from different backgrounds, because I know we have a variety of people in our church. But even Catholic or Orthodox or other liturgical backgrounds, even before that, I want you to think about some of the Old Testament feasts. And if you think about them, if you go back and if you read about them, if you learn about how they were instituted in the law and observed in Israel's history, there are some that are kind of one-offs that lead up to them, but several of them are extended periods of time of worship and celebration. It is not unusual to find God's people from the very beginning of history throughout, the Exodus and the giving of the law and the people of Israel leading to the temple period and all of that, spending extended periods of time focusing on the meaning of a particular season around an important festival. They even have one called the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is another one that lasts a week right after Passover. We've got all of these things. Even in the Old Testament, Hebrew tradition, Hebrew Bible law coming to us, that the pattern was this sort of slow down and almost I'd say just ruminate, meditate, dwell in the reality of the presence and the blessing of God being celebrated in those particular feasts. But too often in our culture, because we always have something to do, there's always something next. We put all of this pressure building up to the day, Christmas Day, and by that certainly even building in our religious observances. Too often it's about the commercial aspect, all of the pressure to do that sort of thing. And then it's like, okay, it's over, it's on to the next thing. For us, it's usually New Year's, another holiday, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, resolutions and all of that. But let me encourage you, particularly if you've got any kind of space or margin, sometimes we call it in church world, in your life right now, some time off where you're not right back at it. You had a holiday, maybe you got an extra day off, a Monday off because Christmas was on the weekend, or you might have it again. But if some people take a week or two off because of that school thing, and maybe if you're one of our teachers or students, that's you right now. Take some time. Can I encourage you to do that? Don't be so quick to rush on to the next thing. Why might it be helpful? Because here is, I think, the reality that I want to stress today. The incarnation is a remarkable thing. And it's not something, that honestly will ever get our minds truly around. It is something that in God's plan and providence, he did in a way that really doesn't make any sense. How does that work? There's no logical way to explain the Trinity and then as it leads to the incarnation. We try to come up with analogies, but even the best analogy is inadequate, incomplete at best. And so because of the incredible depth of meaning and reality to what is the incarnation, the Word becoming flesh, the second person of the Trinity taking on human form, that great, deep reality deserves some time to process. We can't just read Luke 2, 1 through 7, the traditional Christmas story, and go, okay, I get it now. It's so much bigger than that. Now, again, I'm probably over-dramatizing just a little bit to make my point, but I hope you see that point, that too often in our world and in the way that we're sort of programmed to think about things, when we get to something like Christmas, we see it as the end. But in reality, Christmas traditionally has been the beginning of a 12-day, 13-day period of reflection and celebration for God's people. But more than that, it's the beginning of God's redemptive plan to send Jesus to ultimately be the sacrifice for atonement that brings salvation. There's a lot around the incarnation that's worth considering. And I think in our busyness, in the pace of our lives right now, in the demands that are placed upon us because, well, there's a lot of becauses. I'll let you fill in the because it might be different for you than me or someone else. But in that, we're done and we move on. And I don't know if in the flow of how God taught us to deal with these things and showed the examples in things like feasts and celebrations, if that necessarily is always the right way. Yeah, there's time to celebrate every day. I get that. And we should daily have some consciousness of the great realities of our faith. But as it concerns this reality, the central reality of our salvation, the incarnation of Messiah, Son of God, Jesus, Savior, it's worth a few extra days of slowing down and letting it sink in and trying to get a little better handle on what exactly that means. Maybe I sound a little too liturgical in that. I guess I have a bent at times. I see that in my own way of thinking about things to go that way. No, never raised in a liturgical church, but have always, when I've been able to attend or be a part of those things, been quite fascinated by some of the trappings of liturgy that helps us in some ways put a framework around our faith that just simply it's another holiday and we got to move on to the next one often misses. Maybe that's why the beauty of Advent leading up to Christmas, those 4 weeks before, and the 12 days of Christmas. And then in a few weeks, Lent, leading up to Easter and resurrection and all of that. It's worthwhile to slow our pace. I think maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes I think God just wants us to slow down a little bit and simmer in it. You know, I like a good broth. We have some bones left over from our roast from Christmas Day. We're going to make a beef broth with that. But you know how you don't make a beef broth? You don't put the bones in the water with the seasonings and the additives and turn it to boil and let it boil for 10 minutes. Okay, I've got a broth. No, you get it hot, but you turn it so that it's just barely bubbling. And it's that process that pulls and extracts much more of the flavor and the richness to that broth. And I think our faith could benefit from the same kind of reflection and simmering that we might too often rush on past because there's something else to do. So if you have time, if you're able to set aside time even in this 12 days of Christmas, particularly this period between Christmas and New Year's holidays, think on those things, meditate on those things, read through again maybe the Christmas story. You don't have to wait till next December. Pick it up tomorrow or the next day and see the richness and the goodness of God that He's given us through Jesus. Well, I'm going to let that sit with you today. I'm going to head back over to my office and finish some of the other tasks that I have. Like I said, we'll be here Sunday. 9 a.m. is our service. We'll be talking about Simeon and Anna and the presentation of the 8-day-old Jesus at the temple as part of our service there, the last of our Characters of Christmas series. So we invite you to celebrate the new year with us. We'll take communion together as we usher in 2023. I can't even believe I'm saying that in just a few days it'll be next year. So love to have you join us, and thank you for spending these few minutes with me today and every Wednesday. I'm going to go finish these last few sips of coffee, and we'll hopefully touch base soon. Thanks, everybody.